A while ago I started playing the crew again to see if things had improved since the last time, and I was actually pleasantly surprised to see that some new things were actually added and some features which I really liked. For example, now I could actually gain parts by completing challenges with a stock car, which is something that always bothered me in the first version because I, at one point, took my stock Viper on a race across the USA by myself because you can do that with other people in the crew, and each and every challenge I ran across either was unavailable to me because I was too low a level, even though the challenges themselves aren't actually dependent on level, or because I hadn't unlocked the next region and its content. Even though being a game about racing across a country, you shouldn't have to unlock new areas. You're in a car, you can just go there. Or if they were unlocked, I didn't get any rewards for them because I had a stock car. But now I got parts for a stock car. Only not really. If I got a platinum score, they would give me parts due to the new smart loot system. But that system isn't active for anything other than platinum, and because unless you ding max level, which was 50 or 30 or something, you don't get access to platinum rewards, it would still make that drive I did long ago just as boring. But at least now they have made the looking for group feature not a part of the expansion anymore, because it was. And they finally sorted out the hackers. Oh, sorry, I meant they haven't sorted out the hackers 2 years after the game was released. I really wanted to make a show where I say, well, does the crew suck now? Of course not. They improved it, they made it better, they finally gave us that game we've all been wanting, but they haven't. If you get the expansion and actually have access to the new PvP multiplayer component, without which the game is just an excuse to take pictures of cars, you may have some reason to actually play it, but without it, no. Without the Wild Run expansion, it's kind of a pointless game. Completely and utterly pointless. There's no reason for it to exist. So if you bought it, like me, thinking you'd get content for free, oh my god, were we a bunch of idiots? But still, I'm now left without the premise of the show. So instead, let's talk about something else that also relates to cars. Have you noticed how the way these games are made has changed a lot over the years? It's changed mostly in one specific aspect. I mean, just take a look at the first few seconds of these two intro movies of these two games.
Why do we race? Is it to prove how fast we are? How far we can go?
Quick question, what was the first game about and what was the second one about? They're both about racing cars, but only the first one seems to actually acknowledge that. The other one does not. Instead, it goes on some sort of pseudo-philosophical questioning thing about why do we race? With skateboards and running? And look, we have a car too. A car. Remember cars? They were nice once. It just doesn't have that same feel to it, that same, well, respect for what you're actually trying to present. And this is sort of a consequence of what the racing genre became around the year 2000 and something. 2002, 2003, somewhere around there. Mostly around when the Fast and the Furious movies started to come out. Because those movies proved something, that there is a subculture that is very passionate about cars in a certain way. You know the way, street racing, stuff like that, hip-hop, putting NOS on everything, everyone pretending to be Jenny from the block or something, I have no idea, it's an American thing. It's that kind of car culture that you wouldn't expect something like Formula 1 to come out of, because, well, Formula 1 was created in very different circumstances, though you wouldn't expect NASCAR to come out of it either. It's something that doesn't really sort of create something grander. It just is what it is. It's a subculture. A subculture that likes to think great things about itself. Things that aren't always about the actual cars, but more about the lifestyle, the partying, the hot chicks. Very little actual driving and racing. More just cramming a giant stereo speaker into your car and murdering everyone's eardrums. That subculture turned out to be very profitable, so a lot of games either went in that direction or tried to court similar subcultures and sort of left traditional racing, traditional car games in the dust for the most part. I think there are still a few out there that do cater to actual car enthusiasts and not a subculture that is interested in their game about cars having a plot about your brother being murdered and you taking on the evil people that killed him in car syndicate racing crap. The crew had a very bad story. Every racing game has a very bad story and they should stop having them, period. I mean, the last Need for Speed was a Notice Me Senpai game, basically, where you had to get a senpai to notice you by doing stuff, and it had all sorts of side characters that did nothing absolutely in any way, shape or form necessary to the game. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It is in some cases, but it's a very different style of making a game about cars, where you don't actually make the game about cars. The cars are just there as vehicles. They're not the main character. They're not the focus. And that, well, on a personal level, as someone who likes car games that are about cars, this irks me a bit. It grinds my gears. You remember the old games, right? Like Need for Speed 2. That game had actual presentations for each of its cars. Need for Speed 5 was a love letter to all things Porsche. It spanned the entire history of the car manufacturer in a way that I've honestly not seen a game do. Not only through the gameplay, through its Evolution series, but it also had that historical component, with slides, pictures, information about each car. It made it feel unique because it harkened back to the days where Need for Speed was created in a partnership with an actual automotive magazine. I believe it was called Road and Track. And the majority of early racing games got their inspiration from magazines like these and from, well, TV shows that were about cars like the old Top Gear, the one that was firmly about reviewing cars. Now, say what you will about how the newer show from 2002 or 2015 distanced itself from that style and became more about three yokels causing international incidents on a weekly basis. That show still had a large focus on the actual cars. It was made with passion and love for cars. And that's not something I can say about a lot of video games made about cars these days. Not all of them. I'm confident there may be some games which I haven't tried, maybe Drive Club, maybe the last Gran Turismo because I don't have a PlayStation, that still cater to people that love cars and not the show around them, the drama. Because if there aren't, I'm gonna be really sad and honestly disappointed, because games that put an actual deep focus on cars have certain benefits. They can teach you about those vehicles, about how they were made, about the people that created them, about why they were made, why they look like that, why they drive like that, how they actually impacted culture, how they impacted technology, how they left a footprint on our civilization, because a lot of cars have. I'm honestly still waiting on the equivalent of something like Porsche 2004 Ferrari, or maybe Lamborghini, though Lamborghini doesn't have actually enough cars to stretch them out in a game the size of Porsche 2000. Though, in their defense, they do make some insane cars. Well, they did at one point. They made cars that you could not actually reverse without opening the door and hanging out so you can see where you are going. That was what a supercar meant. That's insanity. It's a car that costs more than a house, but it's also incredibly impractical. And still, it's amazingly stylish and cool. You cannot deny that. It's not a Honda Civic that someone put a spoiler on, which was what you would see in most racing games for a while. Though again, I liked the Honda Civic. I liked modding it in Need for Speed Underground. But it's just not the same as driving a Porsche 911 down the French Riviera. There's a difference in style there, a massive one, and it's called class. Those old games had class. Those are the kind of games that would wear a suit. Yes, even Need for Speed 2 would wear a tuxedo and go out to a fancy dinner party with all sorts of billionaires and people of industry and movie stars. I mean, classical movie stars, kings and queens and princes, while the video games we've got in the past few years are the kind that would get drunk at a house party and vomit all over the place. Now from this equation I'm excluding track racing games, the racing simulators, mostly because they appeal to a very niche crowd and for the most part they're still good. Well, yeah, the F1 series has taken a real dive in the past few years to the point where actually I'd say that the first Grand Prix is still better than what Codemasters has been making recently, and honestly, F1 Championship, I think it was 99 to 2002, there's a compilation of them in one game, is still the only Formula 1 game you need to play. Now, I'm hoping that mainstream racing games like the Need for Speed series will go back to its roots and be more about the cars and less about the loud, obnoxious assholes it puts in front of a camera, but that's probably not gonna happen. Still, wouldn't it be nice if someone made one of those historical racing games about, Mercedes, BMW, Lancia, Audi, and someday maybe someone actually will. Until then, I'm reinstalling Need for Speed 5. If you enjoyed this show, hit the like button, subscribe, and share it with your friends. Or, if you thought it was horrible, then share it with your enemies and make them suffer. We shall be your weapon of vengeance. But if you liked what you saw, you could, maybe donate, because basically YouTube is horrible at revenue, by using the link in the description, or just buy my book. It's a fantasy book about, well, a lot of stuff. I guarantee it won't suck, and if it does suck, you can find me here and complain about it.